comes to watering down, there's two things really. But one was, people might remember this if they're old enough, but when Tony Blair got elected prime minister in England back in 1997, he rewrote something that was part of the old creed of the Labour Party. It was something called Clause 4, and it was basically arguing for the common ownership of businesses. It was basically that that Marxist idea that you should take control of all the businesses basically that's out there, and then you put the profits into government and have them divvying up the spoils and everything else. And so what they did was that they transformed the Labour, or Tony Blair largely did, to what he called New Labour, which removed this particular clause to kind of open up the party a little bit more to the conservative side, to people on the fence, to make it more, or less radical. And so what some of the staunch Fabian socialists argued, and some of the Labour Party as well, was that, oh my God, shit, they're turning their back on socialism, Yeah. And that's the clear initial step. You think, oh my God, they're letting in market economies into their party and everything else. But what people need to keep in mind, though, again, is that what is the original traits of where they want to achieve, where they want to go, and also how are they ready to do that process? And it's clear that they've de-radicalized their own clauses throughout the decades now, to be able to later down the road, eventually, when people are ready for it, bring that back. So they realized, okay, we'll need to use the power of the markets, or capitalism in this regard, but then wield that power in our favor. And eventually down the road, in 20, 30 years, maybe in 100 years from now, when people have gone used to that type of way of doing business, they're trying to change the terminology all the time. People are aware of that. Instead of calling it socialism or communism, they call it economic democracy, or progressive, or all these terms you revamp all the time to make it seem less radical. But so that's why this particular idea is, I think, even more dangerous than revolutionary socialism, because that can be dangerous in the short term, because we have the prospect of real violence and bloodshed. Mm-hmm. But when you have an ideology that's moving so slow throughout society, but again, very, very methodical and very, very thought out, people won't be able to defend themselves against it. And it's a way that you bring, new people and young people into the fold. You take over education. You take over all those processes that people grow up by. So eventually you have a government and a state in place that is not Marxist by term, but it is so by action, and it is so by regulation and rules and laws and everything. And I bet, someday down the road again, we're going to see that Clause 4 that Tony Blair managed to change. And by the way, Bill Clinton was also very much involved in this type of politics. They call it third way politics. But again, there's other cues in there that they wanted to reform society economically in the way that they did. And I mean, look at, even Bill Clinton was part of repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, which basically turned the markets into a casino, a gambling place. And again, people have to ask themselves, why did they do that? If they are more involved in that, left kind of way of thinking in politics and economics and everything, why did they do that? And then you realize, again, down the road, you realize that, okay, maybe they're looking at reforming the economic system by actually using it against people in the terms that you crash the economy. I mean, again, all I can say is looking at the London School of Economics, which comes out of the Fabian environment by grants, again, from George Bernard Shaw, I believe, and some of the other people there, you realize how many economists have come out of that environment who are now part in ruling global economics on a high scale. And this is not a 100% plan that's thought out yet. I'm still looking into this and researching some of the people, some of the more commonly perceived people to be in charge of the economic collapse. But you realize then at that point that what if they were actually, they at some point have agreed that let's basically crash the economy consciously. Let's pump, all the bad stuff into that we can in that regard, with the, derivatives and all that kind of stuff that they did. And by regulation, pretty much opening up those doors for the bankers and everything else, so that eventually down the road, you can actually use the incentive of reforming the economy, because now we're never going to be able to, the incentive there is that we can never have a situation again that occurred with the economy as it did in 2007, 2008, So again, I'm looking this from that long-term perspective. What are they seeing? 50 to 100 years down the road, and what are they going to turn this machine into? So there are tons of different components to this, obviously. That we could get more into detail to, but that's what I've been looking at, and therefore that's why I think that the evolutionary version, boiling the frog, is way more dangerous in that regard, because it tends to hide right in front of your eyes in plain sight, and if people can't see it, they can't defend themselves from it, and they don't even know at some point that they actually are favoring a system which completely has come in from the outside and subversively gone in there and just reformed it in that way. So yeah, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, and there's always an exoteric and an esoteric story going on, and the esoteric is the one that most people just would never even think to look in that direction. That's its power.
A frog is a cold-blooded animal, and humans are warm-blooded, so our body burns energy or perspires to maintain the same 98.6 degrees. The cold-blooded frog's body temperature goes up and down with the temperature of its surroundings. Although frogs love water, when I hold it over this pot of boiling water, this frog is very uncomfortable and climbs to get away from it. Now, the water in this pot is room temperature, 69.4 degrees, so he's comfortable when I put him in. If I turn the burner on low flame, his body temperature will adjust, and slowly he will heat up with the water. The water temperature has risen to 80 degrees, and the frog is the same temperature and still comfortable. If I turn up the burner slowly again, he won't notice, because he'll continue to change to be the same as his surroundings. When we started, I held the frog over the first pot of boiling water. He was uncomfortable and he tried to get away from the heat. But now, because we're raising the temperature slowly, he doesn't recognize the danger he's in. He just keeps going along with the changes in his surroundings. Eventually, we can turn up the burner to a deadly boil. He will just keep trying to adjust with it. By the time he realizes it's killing him, it's too late. He won't notice in time because he just keeps changing himself to go along with the changes in his surroundings.